Is it on? There we go. I can see you over this. Stand on my tiptoes. I wanted to ask a question. When did you get neurofibromatosis? I get all kinds of answers when I ask that question.
The only way you get it is afterwards.
Yes, sir. I get all kinds of answers to that question when I ask people that. Some people tell me they got it in their 20s. Some people say they got it when they were babies. Some people even tell me that they got it in their 40s and 50s. But of course, we've all had it since birth. But there's a difference between having it and getting it. Accepting it, understanding it, living with it, and hopefully for all of us, thriving with it. I got my NF when I was 34 years old. I was at my obstetrician's office 8 months pregnant with my 6th child. This was my first visit with this obstetrician since moving, and midway through the exam, she looked at me and she was confused. She asked me what the bumps were on my belly. This looks a lot like neuro, and she couldn't quite say it. You have to understand, I've never once had a doctor come right out and tell me I had NF. And in that moment, I couldn't exactly deny it. I'd always been told that I didn't have NF. I'd always been told not to talk about it. And part of me was thinking that as long as I could ignore it, maybe my NF didn't really exist. But on that day, when my thoughts were with my unborn baby growing inside of me, just a month away from making her way into this world, my NF became very real. This is what my doctor said. Well, I guess there's nothing we could do about it now. I was torn between feeling ashamed and angry. What exactly did she think we would do about it? An abortion? Should I have been sterilized at birth? Shame won out, and all I could really do was acknowledge to her that yes, I had neurofibromatosis. That day started me on the road to getting NF. Thriving would come much later. It's not that I was ignorant to NF. My big brother Mike was diagnosed when he was 5 years old. Though back in the 1970s, he was technically diagnosed with von Regelenhausen's disease. After his diagnosis came my mom's, and my parents had no idea what they were facing. And even 40 years ago, doctors were still facing a long learning curve. Growing up, Mike was the focal point when it came to NF. He had a shunt placed to offset his hydrocephalus and radiation treatments to treat a tumor that had grown on his optic nerve. The problems with Mike, my brother, turned into problems for my family and ultimately played a part in breaking my family up. My dad constantly blaming my mom for giving Mike his problems. My family was split right down the middle. Mike and I went with my mom, and my 2 older brothers, including Mike's twin, went with my dad. In my mind, the defective ones went this way, and the perfect ones went another. We never talked much about what Mom and Mike had, and since I got a clean bill of health from doctors, I never really needed to. I do remember one conversation I had with my mom about NF. After the divorce, Mom, Mike, and I moved into an apartment where Mike got his own room, and I shared one with my mom. One night while we were getting ready for bed, I asked her what the bumps were on her back. Today, I realized that she was just embarrassed. But at 8 years old, all I could really hear was anger. That's NF, Kristi. That's God's curse on our family. Will I get those too, Mommy? Probably. God hates us. As you might guess, that was the last time I ever talked about NF with my mom. But when I look back, I had all the more subtle signs that we know to look for today. From cafe au lait spots that made the girls in gym class always make fun of me for looking dirty, to the constant headaches that my parents mostly ignored and teachers and doctors just told me were stress-related. And until that moment when I was at my obstetrician's office, when my doctor looked at me and shook her head at me in shame, I liked flying under the radar. I drove home from that doctor's appointment in tears. I was getting my NF on the freeway going 65 miles an hour. I was angry and sad, confused, frustrated, embarrassed, ashamed, and scared. More for my kids than for myself. Today I get all kinds of questions about why I had so many kids, even though I have NF. And there are two answers to that. First, how do I know? Maybe I would have had kids, maybe I wouldn't have. But without being in that position, it's impossible to say. And second, even if I was a perfectly healthy woman, my kids would risk all the normal disorders that everybody else risks, from Down syndrome, muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, to even the spontaneous forms of NF. Life means risk. Bringing life into the world carries risk with or without NF. I do know this, though. I wouldn't trade a single one of my kids just to do away with NF. When I got home, thank you. When I got home from that doctor's appointment, I knew it was time to start doing something. I couldn't deny NF's existence in my life any longer. And I knew 3 of my kids already showed signs that they might have NF as well. Cafe au laits that were dismissed and ignored by doctors. After my baby was born, I looked at her every single day checking for NF. And over the next few months, I found new doctors that actually cared and paid attention. 3 of my kids ended up being diagnosed with NF. I had begun to research NF on the internet and started to get so overwhelmed by all of the information out there and all of the misinformation. I had hidden from NF for so long, and my kids had no one but me to advocate for them. I wasn't about to let them go through what I did growing up. But I had grown so accustomed to hiding my bumps and ignoring my headaches and my pain, even while I was educating myself more and more about NF, I was still my mother's daughter. I was so angry at God for this disorder, angry at myself for not knowing more, and angry at a world of doctors that seemed to act both ignorant and dismissive when it came to NF. I needed an outlet for my anger and frustration, so I began a blog where I could rant about the injustice of neurofibromatosis, a blog called Life in the Big City, but city was spelled with an SH. Positive thinking at its best, right? A couple of posts in, I asked my husband to give me some advice. For those of you who don't know my husband, he's a bit addicted to the positive thinking and self-help books and thinking, and he's not always the best person to go to for advice. He read it and complimented my efforts, and then said something to me that would change my perspective forever. Instead of complaining and ranting like everybody else, what if, Kristi, you used your blog to inspire and uplift? What if you used it to educate others? I hated to admit it, but he was right. I wasn't helping anybody by just adding to the negativity of NF. When I realized I might be able to make a difference, even just a small difference, by talking to others about what our family was going through, Thriving with Neurofibromatosis was born. And part of thriving meant I had to start following through with my own health care as well as my kids. And as my husband said, if you don't start taking care of yourself, Kristi, I'm going to have to bring these kids up alone and they'll probably starve, which is true. He does have Domino's on speed dial, though. My doctors okayed an MRI for me, but like with my kids, I had to fight with insurance processors who didn't quite understand the importance of a baseline MRI. They turned down my first request. How many of you have had trouble getting approved for NF-related treatments? I know I have in the States. I know the healthcare system out here is much different than it is in the US, but as I've talked to people throughout Canada, I hear the same solution. Don't give up. Stay on top of your case and be willing to push your doctors. Respectfully educate them and ask for what you need. When you get put on a 6-month waiting list, push back until you get their attention. Half the time, NF patients get put on the back burner because doctors don't understand what we're going through. They don't understand. And it's our responsibility to not sit back and take it, but to let our voice be heard. After another appeal, the insurance finally approved my MRI, and I was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, enlarged ventricles, and a brain tumor. The headaches I had growing up were NF related. If I had a doctor that paid attention and been thoroughly checked out, I would have gotten my NF 25 years ago. But even armed with my new knowledge, I found that I was on a tightrope when it came to NF. I had doctors in the state of Utah tell me, NF doesn't cause pain. Right? I had a doctor in the state of Washington tell me that I had compensated for my hydrocephalus, and there was nothing to do. Nothing could be done. My headaches, they're just stress-related. Before my decision to thrive, I most likely would have put my hands up in the air and believed that I would go on the rest of my life believing nothing could be done. But because of that decision I made that day, the decision I make every day, whether it's a bad day, a good day, a mournful day, or what my kids call a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, I keep going. The more information we gather about what we're dealing with, the more we share that information with each other, the closer we all get to thriving instead of just surviving. Thriving takes action. You may think that you're stuck with the doctors you have, but you're not. If you can't educate the doctors you have, find new ones. Your children are worth the effort. You are worth the effort. One of the biggest questions I get about thriving, I probably get 100 comments a week. People wondering, how do you do it? How do you deal with 6 kids and NF? How do you even get up in the morning? I've been accused of faking my thriving attitude, even faking the treatments that my kids have gone through. When I sat down to write Thriving with Neurofibromatosis, I just wanted a way to entertain and inform those living with NF and the doctors that treat it. I wanted a concrete process to thriving. It is a process, a daily decision, and sometimes it works better than others. Some days it works better than others. Everyone in this room can go beyond simply surviving our disorder, moving beyond our natural fears and NF-inflicted pains. We can make the world a better place. Just the fact that you're here today shows that you care about educating yourself. There's so much information that exists out there about the symptoms of NF. All you need is a computer and an internet connection to learn about the hundreds and thousands of different cases of NF, even while it affects each of us in different ways. Educating yourself puts you in a place of better control. You'll have a better idea of what to expect from your own case, whether it's affecting you or your spouse or one of your kids, even while it's affecting all of us in different ways. I'm constantly learning more and more about NF, from what I can do to offset my hydrocephalus, to what my daughter Bailey can expect from her 2 brain tumors, and the chemo treatments that she went through, and the potential damage that those tumors might have on her hearing in the future. If I'm not reading up on my own family's symptoms, I'm researching problems and questions that I get from friends around the world. I'm not an expert on NF, but I've become an expert at finding people who are and getting answers out to people the best I can. Action and attitude, they're the only part of your life that, that you can control. We don't always think so, and we grow up in a world that teaches us to blame how we feel on anything we can find. Blame God. Blame the doctors. Blame our parents. But it's not those people who are responsible for how we feel. Another question I get is, how do you stay positive through it all? Honestly, I don't. I have bad days and bad weeks, just like you guys. You don't just sit there and hear that your daughter has to go through 2 years of chemotherapy to shrink a brain tumor that is invading an inoperable part of her brain and just go on thinking life is great. My attitude didn't magically change. My actions changed. Instead of a negative blog, I began a positive blog. Instead of sitting helplessly by, waiting for NF to affect me, I began seeking out answers. Instead of hiding behind a curtain, I put myself out there, in front of you, in hopes of making a difference. Every blog post I write keeps my thoughts in check. Every email I respond to from a distraught mother or a frustrated friend drives my attitude to where it needs to be to help support and encourage. When I find my attitude suffering the most is when I choose to sit around and do nothing. I lose myself in my negativity. Thriving or not, I do find myself there. I just can't stay there. I won't stay there. It's when you find the energy to take the actions you need to move to the next moment of your life, when you choose to take action instead of letting NF act upon you, that's when you thrive. How many of you watched Oprah Winfrey refer to NF as the elephant man disease? This was a couple years ago. You may not like this, but it's not Oprah's fault she doesn't understand NF. It's our fault. If we want the world to recognize us, raise money to fund research to help us, accept us and understand us, we have to share ourselves with them. We have to accurately educate people on NF. We can take the actions. Once we do that, we can take the actions to educate others. To help our families understand us more, to open the eyes of doctors who don't specialize in NF, to treat our symptoms seriously, and get us the treatment that we need and deserve, even if they didn't know that treatment existed before we walked into their office. Not everybody wants to share NF with others. I get it. But would you be willing to start here? Share your story with someone sitting at your table? Tell your story. After all, my NF is different than yours. Building a network of friends who do understand you, who do understand what you're going through, can be the most valuable defense against the temptation to isolate ourselves. When we open ourselves up at any level, we gain strength. We spread awareness and let the world know that we aren't going to be pushed in the corner any longer. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, yeah, it's easy for her, or geez, I can't take another word of this motivational garbage. Then just listen to this closely. I was you, and sometimes I still am. My husband is a motivational speaker, and I spent years blocking out his positive attitude platitudes. I focused on everything that was wrong in my life. And it wasn't until I yielded to the fact that not only was I hurting myself by building a wall around NF, I was hurting those around me that loved me and cared about me. I deserve better. My family deserves better. And you guys deserve better. I spent a lot of time talking about my life and the lives my kids are living. We're all just doing our best to live each day as it comes. Celebrate what we can, even as we face the challenges that NF throws at us. When you leave here today, after spending this wonderful time with this great group of people who do get you, who do support you, you'll be heading back into the real world, back to your lives. What are you going to take with you? Learn something today and act on it, and then share it. Take pieces of this conference out into the world with you, and let the people who don't understand NF, just a little bit of your story, understand what you're dealing with. Let them experience this conference in some small way. Educate yourself. Take new actions and watch yourself develop a new attitude with each action that you take. I'm really thrilled and excited to be out speaking about NF, and so appreciative to Desiree. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. If you are interested in purchasing my book, it's in the back. But I'm so happy to be sharing my victories and my struggles with you on my blog, and now in person. But one person can only do so much. It's up to us as the NF community to make sure the world gets neurofibromatosis. So our living isn't just about surviving NF, but thriving with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have